Welcome back to the Pete Souza Show, presented by Slovacix. By the way, Claire, I get to do my best like Jay Leno impression.
I love it. I love it, Pete.
Killer Story. How's it going?
Going really well. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So Killer Story is the book. It's out. It's already killing. Talk to me a little bit about that. Was a lame joke, but it's the truth. All right.
Hey, I'll take it.
Talk to me a little bit about, I spoke earlier about your work with 48 Hours. I actually watched Temptation in Texas over the weekend, which I have some questions about. We can do that at the end. But Killer Story, the truth behind true crime television. Of course, and we talked about the podcast you have with the Rogue Media Network as well. Last Days on Earth and Justice Pending. But talk a little bit about Killer Story and the inspiration behind this book.
I wanted to take people where no audience has ever gone before. And people watch true crime television, they listen to the podcast, but not many people have worked on these shows. And so I wanted to bring people behind the scenes and give them all the producing secrets of what we do to get these stories on television.
I was thinking a little bit about that because watching that Temptation in Texas, it was Peter Van Zandt.
Yep.
And that was back in 2011? I guess the murder was in 2011. Yeah. So when did you film that story? Like when was all of that being done?
2014. Yeah, we were filming that.
So now when you guys do the prison interviews, right?
Right.
Like, or in the jail at the time, because it was before any sentencing came down. Are you there?
So most of the time I am. For the Michelle Williams one, I was not working for 48 Hours yet. So I wasn't there. But for all the other cases, I would be there. I would either be in the little tiny room, which is hard to believe, or they would make like a video village where we would be able to watch monitors in a room around the corner. So yeah, it was always an adventure getting into jail or prison. It's quite the security process.
Well, man, what is that like for you guys when you set up an interview, you as a producer with someone who is, going to be on trial or is on trial for the murder of someone, maybe usually it's someone that they're very close to. And that they're going to they got a story. What's the approach when you guys head into these situations and those types of interviews?
So we know that we have a limited amount of time because we're there, by the good grace of the law enforcement that are allowing us to do this interview. So we have to try to get to the good stuff pretty quickly. We want to make sure we ask the big questions. Did you do it? And, what really happened if they're saying that they didn't commit the crime, how did you get wrapped up in this, and allow them to tell their side of the story. Most of the people behind bars, if you've ever noticed, they say they didn't do it, right? They're there wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted. And while that's true for some people, usually with our 48 Hours cases, we've done our due diligence, and there's been a mountain of evidence proving that this person committed the crime. So we're trying to get them to come clean. We're trying to get them to admit to what they did and, give the answer that everybody wants to know, which is why.
What are some of the other threads? You mentioned the motives, by the way. That's usually, as a viewer, my number one thing.
Yeah.
Like, why did this happen? Why did they do it? But when you talk about this book, what's one thing that people will be surprised about to learn this process, what it's like?
I think people would be surprised to learn how many hoops that you have to jump through as a producer. It is not an easy job to try to get an exclusive story on primetime network television. And the battle royale between 48 Hours and Dateline in 2020 is probably one of the more interesting threads in the book, because there's some war games going on, Pete. There's some sabotage, there's story stealing, there's all sorts of things happening.
What is one of the wildest situations you've been involved in when you felt like, that you can share? When you thought you had a story locked in or you lost it or vice
Yep.
versa. You got, maybe somebody has a relationship with you or someone like, Peter Van Zandt and they come to them and they say, okay, or, Maureen Maher, we want to give them the story.
Yeah.
How, can you give me some insight on that?
Sure. So I think the craziest thing that happened to me one time was covering a case in Collin County, Plano, Texas, and thinking, that I had the story, thinking that the characters were going to work with me exclusively. And over the course of a weekend, having what I believe to be major sabotage from Dateline, a producer calling and impersonating me and really having an aggressive conversation with this character that I thought was going to go on camera exclusively with me and turning the character against me. And so I show up on Monday morning to court. I have no idea what's happened and she'll no longer talk to me, and it's this whole crazy discovery of me trying to figure out what happened and her finally saying, well, I'm really sorry, but the person who called me, they said they were Claire and they worked for 48 hours. And they said if I didn't do the interview today, that they were walking away from the story. And, I just couldn't do that. But they don't actually sound like you do now, and it was like this light bulb moment. And so, from then on, I told characters, if you ever get a call from someone, and it's not this cell phone number, this is the only number I'll ever call you from. But if you ever get a call from someone saying it's me, don't believe them. Like it sounds paranoid, but it happens.
If I'm watching the 48 hours, right, that you produced, and I'm not hearing or when you're talking about somebody and I'm not hearing or seeing from them, I can only presume that they're either in prison or in jail, right? Because usually early on in the episode, I'll hear from most of the characters, right? But
right.
The exception was I was watching that. So you didn't work on that Temptation in Texas? I thought you were a field producer for that.
No, so there was 2 episodes. So the very
Oh,
first
okay.
episode, yeah. So the very first episode, I was the special CBS News consultant, and so I was actually on camera talking about the case as a local journalist who broke it, right?
Okay.
So who dug up all these sources and did this investigative reporting. So that was episode number 1. And
all right,
then,
so let's go back. Hold on. Let's go back now because this is awesome. Because you broke this story, right?
I did, yeah.
So where were you working at the time?
So I was working for Culture Map Dallas, which is a great daily news website. And I was one of the founding editors of that Dallas site. So it started in Houston and it had come to Dallas. And one of the things that I did is I carved out space for investigative reporting. And so I had published a 3-part investigative series on Michelle Williams called Did Michelle Williams Get Away with Murder? And it was about this twisted tale of the death of her husband, Greg Williams, and, all the lies that she told along the way, because she claimed there'd been an intruder in her house. She claimed that he committed suicide. Then she claimed that, there went back to the intruder story and said, but, I'm covering up for the intruder because they're going to come get me. I mean, it was just one thing after another, Pete.
Yeah. And so that was honestly unbelievable. And then you guys interview her. And
yes,
she has a plea bargain going, and she completely blows up the plea bargain because it's a guilty plea, right?
Correct.
Guilty to, what was it? Tampering with evidence and then something else.
Yeah, tampering with evidence and deadly conduct.
Yes,
so rare felony. Yeah.
Yeah, so
sweetheart
it's like
deal.
2 years or 20 years, but she's probably gonna leave prison alive. On camera with you guys, she tells another lie that she didn't do it. So the judge says, screw this, you're going to trial.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you're talking to somebody that Michelle Williams, like if her lips were moving, she was lying. That's the impression I got. How did you uncover that story? How did you figure that out when you were working at this, what was it? Culture
Map.
Yeah. Well, so how did you uncover this?
Yeah, so I came across the story. It was reported, locally, just that the plea deal had been reached. That this woman was pleading guilty in the death of her husband. And I just thought, who gets a plea deal for murder in Texas? Like, what is going on here? This is not normal. And I just got really curious about who this woman was. And so I started, did a deep dive on her background and found out that she had been married twice before and just had a trail of destruction in her wake. And so I just reported it all. I talked about the cons that she had run through the years. She had faked pregnancies. She'd lied about her children's paternity. She had killed a man's dog. She had poisoned a fish tank. She had done a lot of really morally troubling things.
And she may have killed her brother-in-law too.
Yes. Yes. So that was really stunning to discover that less than a year before her husband died of a single gunshot wound to the head with his own gun, her brother-in-law suffered the same fate. And that case was immediately ruled a suicide. And Michelle Williams, actually had, put everything in place to have her brother-in-law cremated.
Yeah, like 24 hours after almost.
Yes. Yeah. So she stepped in places the next of kin and was really working everything at hyper speed, and people weren't suspicious of her yet. But then when her husband died of the same exact injury less than a year later, and she had him cremated as well, people started asking questions. And I was the first journalist to talk about those two cases, potentially being connected.
So then, and this gets to Killer Story and the behind the scenes of how this stuff works. So then does CBS reach out to you?
Yes. So actually all three networks reached out to me after the Michelle Williams story. NBC's Dateline, ABC's 2020, and CBS's 48 Hours. And they were all interested in the twisted tale of Michelle Williams. So I got a baptism by fire with the national television shows. And I ended up feeling like CBS and 48 Hours were the straightest shooters, and they offered to come meet me in Dallas to take me out to dinner at Mi Cocina.
Oh, right. Miko.
Really charmed me.
Yeah.
So, I ended up working with them, and we've been on a quite the journey ever since.
Yeah. And by the way, the podcast, Last Days on Earth, which I'm going to 100% listen to now because it's based around this Michelle Williams and Greg Williams story.
So the latest season of Final Days on Earth has Michelle Williams' story front and center. So we go through all the ins and outs of her life, of the various crimes she's been accused of and suspected of, and it's a really wild ride.
What are some of the other things, you've had a lot of opportunities to talk about this book and tell people why it's interesting. What are some of the other reasons people should read this book?
I think that if you enjoy watching true crime television, you will learn things from this book that you can't learn anywhere else. And I don't think you'll ever watch your favorite true crime show the same way again.
Are you going to spoil it for us, or are you going to make it better? I would imagine you're only going to make my.
I'm going to make it better, Pete. I'm going to make it better because you're going to know whenever you see, the killer in prison, you're going to be like, oh, they're wearing a dress shirt instead of their normal prison clothes, and I bet that shirt belongs to a member of the camera crew because that's how we roll. Yeah, that's usually how it would work. Yeah.
Wow. So you'll give them an opportunity. Hey, do you want to put this on or?
Exactly. Yeah. So we try to work it through the prison, but a lot of times they would say like it's too much of a security risk. So once they're already in the room, already sitting there under monitor with their cuffs on, everything, we would say, be really nice if they weren't in orange or yellow or, whatever stripes the prison garb is. And, this guy over here, he's size XL, looks about the same. Could we do a swap, And sometimes the camera guys would bring like their dry cleaning so that we would have an extra shirt. It was a go-to move. Yeah.
So if I give you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but if I give you this is the true crime personality draft. All right. And so you get to pick an anchor to work with. Okay. And you can, anybody, Josh Mankiewicz, Keith Morrison, Maureen Maher, some of Andrea Canning, and then of course the Peter Van Zants. Who do you want to work with? Who are you going to take?
Oh man, that's tough. My number one pick.
Yeah, who's your number one?
So I gotta go with Mo. I gotta go with Maureen Maher. She was amazing to work with, and we did a lot of fun stories together. She was actually the only person
Fun.
that fun. I mean, fun for us. You know, it's dark humor, but we would run and gun. She was, no frills. We'd hop in the rental car together and chase down the story and get whatever we needed. And it was always we always had a lot of really good conversations on the road, because sometimes we'd be driving 2, 3, 4 hours to get to a prison or something, and so she was a great road warrior.
I know you have this in the book, but for people that don't know, how long does it take for these stories to come to fruition? Like, how long are you working on a story? Because when I'm sitting at home refreshing my 48 hours waiting for a new episode,
Yeah.
because I've watched every single one under the sun, like, how long do they take to come together before they make it on air?
So it usually would take years, because we would start following the story like when, the case broke, when there was a murder, and then, there's been an arrest and then a trial. And that stuff takes a really long time to go through, the court system. So typically, I mean, 2 to 3 years, we would work on a case before it would air. But there were crashes, whenever major events would happen, like the Dallas police shooting happened on a Thursday night, and we went to air in our regular time slot on Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah.
With that, like that story, the latest on that story.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a huge network-wide effort. So everybody got involved, and we had correspondents, from the CBS This Morning working with us, and we had just a full team, like probably 4 times the amount of people that would normally be working on a 48 hours worked on that crash. And, that was a breaking news special. So we did that. And we also talked about other high profile police shootings around the country that had happened. That was the summer of 2016.
Yeah.
It was absolutely just a really fraught time for, law enforcement shootings. And it was something else. So that was a really interesting experience to be on that kind of schedule, because like I said, we usually had years to work, and this time we had 2 days. So yeah.
Do you at all, when you're doing your stories, and I'll let you go after this, but when you're doing these stories, do you become a little jaded because a lot of the characters you're working with are full of BS? And it's like one of those things, like when you meet a police officer, sometimes you wonder why they can be rough around the edges. Well, it's because everybody they're talking to is lying.
Yeah.
Do you notice that with yourself a little bit, like kind of becoming a little hardened by a lot of these stories?
I definitely became more skeptical. I'm one of those people that I like to trust what people are telling me. I want to believe you, and so it was an interesting experience to recognize that, there are people in the world that they will lie to your face and not even bat an eye about it. So that definitely started to affect me. I think it's part of the reason why I left true crime television, because I felt like being on that sort of pace where I was covering all these stories and talking to all these killers was starting to weigh on me emotionally. And it was something that I wanted to, I didn't want to become hardened. I didn't want to become jaded. I wanted to stay true to myself. And so it was a point where I felt like, to do that, I was going to have to step away from that job.
Yeah, well, it's nice to know there's humanity on both sides, because it's got to be tough. I would imagine it's got to be really tough. How many years did you do that for, and how many episodes?
So for 8 years, I did it. I went back and looked at all my episodes, and I think it was around like 28 episodes that I was credited on. And, what I talk about in the book is we worked on so many other stories that never made air. So, even if it doesn't come up on 48 hours, it doesn't mean that I wasn't working on it and it wasn't affecting me. And, I probably worked on, 50, 60 cases in that amount of time just to get the ones that would actually make air.
I keep saying last one, but here's the last one.
Yeah.
I promise. Like I told you I would keep you all day. How many relationships did you forge with like law enforcement? Like, did you almost find yourself really leaning on them and developing really good sources,
Yeah.
all over the country, all over Texas, right? Because in order to do these stories the right way, you've got to have legitimate sources who are telling you the truth.
Yes, yeah. A lot of cops and a lot of attorneys ended up being good friends of mine because that's how you get the stories, that's how you get the information. And yeah, we started to develop trust and develop, a way of communicating. And because I wasn't like in the daily grind of, daily news, I didn't have these deadlines. I didn't have to have a story on the 5 o'clock news,
Yeah.
so they could trust me with information, and know that I wasn't going to report it the second that it left their lips, right? I was
Yeah.
able to hold things close to the vest, and I could tell them, that I could let them know like this wasn't going to air until, X date. And so they were able to say things that by that time it was okay to be public. So, it was interesting kind of doing that tightrope walk with, you have to build up your relationship with these sources, and you have to prove yourself trustworthy. And to do that, they're willing to give you information, like you have to be willing to reciprocate. So it was always interesting. Like I was trying to um, let them know like what it was really like to be a producer and the things that I was up against in my job, so that hopefully they would help reveal things that were going on in the case. And yeah, I ended up to this day, I have lots of cops all over the country and attorneys all over the country that I regularly, text or email with, and they're all reading the book, so it's pretty interesting.
Here is the book, Killer Story. She is Claire Sanema. Amazing work, Claire. Really, thank you so much for bringing some of this stuff to life. I haven't read the book yet. I cannot wait to read it. And for all you do for Rogue Media too, it's there's a lot going on. So the podcasts right now are Last Days on Earth, right? And
Final Days on
Final
Earth.
Days on Earth. And then what's the one that's out right now?
Justice Pending. So that's the
Justice Pending.
spinoff that I've done with my true crime bestie Susan, who also helped me on Killer Story with great writing and editing. And we talk about all the cases that keep us up at night and ones that we're considering for future seasons of Final Days on Earth. So it's a weekly true crime chat show, one case per episode. And yeah, we're just kind of workshopping these cases in real time.
Amazing work, Claire. And thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Pete.
You got it. Claire Sanema. The book is Killer Story. The Pete Souza Show is presented by Slovacix. We'll be back.